Good morning, my name is Racheal Trigleth, and I'm going to be talking about the research I conducted on celebrity endorsements and student politics. So first I just wanted to start off by talking about kind of how I got here. Obviously within the decade, social media and the access to the internet has steadily increased, and now the younger generations have a lot more faster access to it than any of us ever did, and I think that's where it comes in that it's very important to teach the value of critical thinking, thinking on your own, and finding valid resources and reputable resources when it comes to any topic, but especially current affairs in the world. So in AP seminar last year, I actually did some research that concluded the student population was the most susceptible to celebrity bias, and we're most likely to conform to that bias because we see celebrities as like mentors, as coaches, people we look up to. So I kind of wanted to go further with that and see if there was any correlation between that conformity and the location of the student in general. So some of my foundational literature I used, this first article, Can Celebrity Endorsements Affect Political Outcomes? Not only did it conclude that when Oprah Winfrey endorsed Barack Obama in the 2008 primary election, it also did go through and it talked about the products that she talked about on her show and how their sales actually spiked afterwards. Who is the celebrity endorser? This was a content analysis of the meaning transfer model, and basically how we have a meaning towards a celebrity and that meaning transfers to the product that they endorse. So that positive or negative feeling that we have towards someone will transfer to the product that they talk about. Media bias and influence. They concluded that there was evident bias towards the Democratic Party in newspaper articles, which are not as prevalent now as they used to be, but the older population is still susceptible to this bias, and I think it's just important to see that there is still bias in all different forms of media as well. And then the urban and rural classifications, I just use that to define the parameters that I use for urban and rural for my method later on. Just some quick definitions. An endorsement is just active giving public approval to someone or something, and political socialization is all the outside influences that influence how we form our own political views. Urban is defined as a continuously built up area that has a population of 50,000 people or more, and rural is any incorporated area with 2,500 people or less located outside of So this leads to my research question: how do mainstream music artists' political endorsements affect students' political socialization in major cities and rural areas? So obviously there has been research aligning that the student population are most susceptible to conform to the celebrity bias, but there hasn't been anything focused on whether location has anything to do with how likely we are to conform. So my hypothesis is that students that are in an urban area are more likely to conform to celebrity endorsements simply because they're in a more built up area. They are around a lot more people, a lot more access to a lot more cultures, and they have a lot more resources. So for this, I did a mixed method, and I wanted to start with my content analysis. So I first just wanted to see kind of the attitudes online towards politics right now. So I chose 5 different celebrities that endorsed the 2020 political candidate on Twitter, which ended up being Harry Styles, Taylor Swift, Lil Wayne, Lil Pump, and Maren Morris. With that, I got the pop genre, the rap genre, and the country genre. With that, I did have some limitations. Not only were there not a lot of political endorsements on Twitter at the time for the 2020 election, there also were a lot less for Donald Trump, which I had to use Lil Pump, who endorsed Donald Trump, but he only has a little less than 1 million followers compared to Harry Styles, Taylor Swift, and Lil Wayne, who all have over 30 million followers. As well as I could not find anyone except for Maren Morris with the time that I was given that endorsed endorse a political candidate in general, and she also has a little less than 1 million followers. So what I wanted to do with that is take the endorsement and go through all of the direct comments under it and just see if there was actual political basis to people agreeing with their endorsement, or if they were just simply stating that they agreed, who disagreed, and who didn't really say anything about the endorsement in general. So with that comes my 4 categories: agree with understanding, if there was any basis to any form of agreement. I agree, yes, thank you so much for stating this. Agree without understanding, just simply stating that they agree, disagree, and neutral. So I turned those into percentages to try and make a generalization about attitudes online. So here are my findings for that. So Harry Styles endorsed Joe Biden, and out of the 159 comments, only 0.63% had any kind of political basis to why they agreed with him. 39.6% just stated they agreed. 27.7% disagreed, and 32.1% argued. For Lil Wayne, he endorsed Donald Trump, and out of 202 comments, 3% did have some political basis. 14.9% just stated they agreed. 62.4% disagreed, and 19.3% were neutral. Taylor Swift endorsed Joe Biden, and out of 230 comments, 2.2% actually gave some political background. 37.8% just stated they agreed. 33.9% disagreed, and 26.1% were neutral. Lil Pump, out of 189 comments, 0.5% showed any political basis. 2% stated they agreed, and 87.4% disagreed, and 10.1% were neutral. Marion Morris had 194 comments. Nobody had any kind of political facts to say why they agreed with her. 56.7% just simply stated that they agreed with her. 37.1% disagreed, and 6.2% were neutral. So overall, there was definitely more people agreeing to the Biden endorsements than the Trump endorsements. Obviously, I had more Biden endorsements than Trump. I did notice that there was less political basis to the comments under the Biden endorsements, but I noticed when it came to the Trump endorsements, when people disagreed, there was actually a lot more political basis for why they disagreed with the endorsement, which I found interesting. And there were definitely a lot more insults under the Trump endorsements compared to the Biden endorsements. So connecting back to the media bias and influence, there was definitely an evident bias towards the Biden endorsements. So next I did a survey, and I sent it out across schools across the United States. And I took those same 5 endorsements, and I asked students to rate how likely they were to agree to the endorsement using the Likert scale without knowing who made it first, and then doing the same thing but knowing who made the endorsement. So just quick on the Likert scale, it's just a scale that measures attitudes and behavior, and it ranges from 1 through 5. Scaling strongly disagree to strongly agree. So those numbers, whatever they rated, the number 1 through 5, the inner city schools, I added all of those numbers up and gave them an average before they knew who made it and then after, and kind of compared those averages, as well as the kids in the small towns. So my findings for this, for the Harry Styles endorsement, before the kids in the city schools knew who it was, they averaged a 3.77, and then they dropped 0.04 points. 68.2% did increase their answer, however, 13.6% decreased, and 18.2% of them did not change their answers. The kids from the small town schools, they did not change at all. They started with a 2.67 and they ended with a 2.67. This is where another one of my limitations does come in. I was only able to get 3 respondents that actually were in a small town, just due to the student population being a very hard and restricted population. For Lil Wayne, the mean score before the inner city students knew who it was. It was 2.64, and they had a 0.41 drop. Only one person increased their likelihood to agree with the endorsement. 31.8% decreased, and 63.6% did not change their answer. Once again, the students that were in the small towns stayed the same. They haven't changed. They started with the 3 and they ended with the 3. For Taylor Swift, this was one of the biggest ones. The students within the cities started with a 3 and they ended off with a 3.55, which was a 0.55 increase. While only 36.7% increased their answer, all of those students, they had a 2 or a 3 and they jumped to a 5. So that really helped that average. Only 18.2% decreased their answer and 45.5% did not change their answer. This is the first time students changed their mind that lived in a small town. They started with a 2.33 and they ended off with a 3, which was a 0.67 increase. 2 of them increased their answers, which is why there was such a jump in the average, and only 1 of them did not change their answer. For Little Pump's endorsement, they started off at a 2, and then the students within the major cities went to a 1.77, which was a 0.23 decrease. And again, the students within a small town did not change their answer at all. Lastly, for Mayor Morris's endorsement, they started out with a 2.82 and they ended off with a 3.27, which was a 0.45 increase. And again, this is the only other time the students within a small town even changed their answers. They started with a 2.33 and ended off with a 2.67, which was a 0.34 increase. Only 1 person changed their answer. So overall, in my data, the students that were in a major city, they definitely were more likely to change their answer, but that is an obvious limitation due to the fact that I only had 3 students in a small town. The Biden endorsements definitely overall received a higher average, which does align to what I found in my content analysis. And again, I can't conclude that students within rural areas are less likely to perform just due to the sample size. So some of my limitations were obviously my sample size. I definitely needed a bigger sample for both populations to make an actual generalization about my hypothesis. Time was a very big constraint. I wasn't able to continue to reach out to small town areas and get permission to send out my survey. The celebrities themselves were definitely a limitation. I could only gather 3 different genres, and the difference in followers and comments were also kind of a limitation as well. Response bias, of course, is always a limitation when you have a survey. People aren't always going to tell the truth if you 100% honest. And then only using one social media platform, I only got one population of people with which there's a lot more social media platforms. Not everyone has Twitter. So in the future, I would gather a larger sample size, and I would definitely use more than 5 endorsements, more than 5 celebrities, and I would use more than one of the social media platforms as well.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much. All right, oral defense panel, question number 1. Rachel, how did your initial exploration of the scholarly conversation lead to your final research question? How did your initial exploration of the scholarly conversation lead to your final research question?
I definitely think I was one of the ones that in the beginning I did not exactly know what I was going to do, and I was having a really hard time trying to figure out where I could land. And then I kind of, once I revisited what I did last year that I really liked doing and talking about, learning about, that actually helped me just go forward in finding more than what I found last year and being able to correlate that and connect it to get my final
How does your new understanding address the gap in the scholarly conversation?
Can you say it one more time?
How does your new understanding address the gap in the scholarly conversation?
I think it's important that we address the bias of the media and where it's coming from, and how we can fix that so that we, as a country and as a population, get the most informed news that we can. I think this is just kind of a stepping stone into how we can maybe solve a bigger issue.
So think back to the initial curiosity that sparked your inquiry, and what other curiosities do you have, and how has this process prepared you to explore them?
So I definitely am still interested if I got like a larger sample size of students who live in small town areas, if they actually would be less likely to conform, because it does show in my data that they were less likely to, but it was only 3 people, so I can't necessarily say that that's true. So I would love to actually see if that's true.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much. All right, this floor is open for general questions.
I'm curious as to the location, like geographical location. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where your cities, where your rural were located.
So I couldn't necessarily I didn't necessarily pinpoint. I can tell you the ones that I saw the most, but I just used it based on I looked up the city that they were in, the population, and then I just put it in as this is the city file, this is the urban file. But I got a lot from Washington State, New Jersey, Florida. Those were more of my city student respondents, and then the ones that I got mostly for the small town was Idaho, and there was one more, I cannot remember now. But I didn't get a lot of responses, but they were definitely all scattered all over.
I'm just curious if there was a geographical influence there.
I just anywhere that would take it, honestly.
Okay, I have one. So I noticed that the celebrities that produced the most change were the 2 females, right? Mary Morris and Taylor Swift, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I wonder, do you know the gender or identity in that way of the people who change? I'm just wondering if it was girl power and what, you know what I mean? If they were, if that had anything to do with it or not.
No, I didn't ask them their gender, but
Yeah.
that definitely would be something to look at in the future.
I would wonder.
Okay. What did you do if they were from a city that had more than 2,500 but less than 50,000? You just put them in the closest one.
I actually didn't run into that problem.
Nice.
All of the ones that I had, they were usually between 70 to 100,000 people. So I didn't have that problem, but I guess if I did, I probably would just. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. If that problem had arisen, I guess I would have figured it out, but I don't know.
All right, so I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
How many did you get for the inner city kids?
I got 22.
And could there have been a bias from your artists, kind of knowing who their fan base is and
Yeah.
tailoring their stuff?
There definitely There definitely can be, because if you like somebody and you follow them and you see what they have to say, there's obviously already going to be that predisposed bias, which is another factor, of course, because all of the Trump endorsements, they scored substantially lower than all the Biden endorsements, and I think that could just be from the population on Twitter as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask if, Twitter, there's probably like a pretty wide age range. I mean, it would be younger people, but not necessarily students, like
Yeah.
old and things.
Yes.
My question is, how did you, like, did you ask let's say the rural kids, right? Whether they were familiar with the artist that they were reading about? Like, how do you know they conformed versus they didn't know who the person was?
So the only reason that the first question, I asked, I had my consent form and I asked, just like what school and what city do you attend, no other like identifying features. And then I just asked them if they had listened to or heard of any of the following. And if they hadn't, then they just didn't do the survey.
Okay.
Did you manually go through all of the responses yourself and document each and every one of them?
Yeah, it was on the Google form, so it wasn't that terrible.
Did you, I'm just curious, like I cannot imagine reading through all the comments and all the, like,
The Twitters?
yes, just all the vitriol that is out there. Did you find, like, did you reflect on you and like your susceptibility to things, or did you like connect, you know what I mean? Like, talk.
I definitely, I feel like we're all predisposed to a certain bias.
Yeah.
To a degree.
Sure.
I like to think that I believe what I believe, and that's just, I'm not really going, I personally don't feel like I'll conform to somebody else. But I definitely can see where it happens through the comments, of course, but also when my survey happened, I had somebody actually say yes, I'll conform, I'll do whatever Taylor Swift tells me. So I was point proven right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what the media, because that study's from 2011, what the media bias is now.
Yeah.
Because it has to have gotten, it has to have changed over the last 12 years. Maybe gotten more extreme, or,
Yeah.
who knows? Balanced out a different, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Other questions?